The Archon War was an era of various power struggles between gods that began several thousand years ago for unknown reasons. Although scholars in Teyvat believe it began over 7 divine seats in Celestia. While different regions settled their power struggles at different times, the era drew to a close 2,000 years ago after the final seat was claimed. How or why the Archon War began is currently a mystery. Gods were able to coexist relatively peacefully before the war began, so the circumstances that triggered the Archon War are currently left to speculation. The logistics of the war are also unknown, such as how the nations were divided or how the victors were determined. According to Soraya, the war began as a struggle over the 7 divine seats in Celestia, both for supremacy and to see their plans for a prosperous humanity to come to fruition. However, not all gods participated in the war with the intent of taking a divine seat. Some wanted to defend their territory, while others didn't even want to fight and tried to save as many people as possible from the destruction of the war. An alternate explanation is that the death of gods removed divine seats that previously existed in Celestia, and the 7 were either gods who kept their seats by prevailing over the others, or were beings who ascended to godhood after defeating gods of old. Decarabian's death resulted in the crumbling of an ancient seat of divinity, while Barbatos ascended to godhood and became the Anemo Archon. Novelet, the reborn Hydro Sovereign, recalled his predecessor's memory after the return of the ancient authority that all fragments of the primordial were driven to devour each other. It is presumed that the aforementioned event is the Archon War, and the heavenly principles manipulated the gods to eliminate each other. After the 7 were established, most defeated gods fled Teyvat and took refuge in the Dark Sea, lands outside of Teyvat where the 7 have no dominion, where they became known as evil gods. Some gods, however, chose to cooperate with the 7 and even became important figures such as Andreas and Marcosius. So let's start with nation by nation what happened there in Archon War era. Mondstadt, 2,600 years ago, in the midst of the Archon War, the city of Mondstadt was located northwest of the current location, what is now known as Stormterror's lair. Back then, there were 2 warring gods, Decarabian, the god of storms, and Boreas, the king of the north wind. The entity who would become Barbatos was but a wisp of the wind, with little to no power. At that time, Mondstadt was a wasteland of ice, snow, and endless icy blizzards, almost impossible for humans to live in. This was all caused by Boreas, who gained his powers from an ancient and likely deceased god. In order to protect his people from the cold, Decarabian enclosed the city into a wall of storms, letting nothing go in or out of it. Boreas declared war on Decarabian, but was incapable of landing even a scratch on his tower. For his part, Decarabian seemed either uninterested in or incapable of defeating Boreas and was content with keeping his people safe. Unbeknownst to Decarabian, however, his people felt trapped and worshipped him out of fear, which he mistook for genuine devotion. During his time as a wisp of the wind, Barbatos befriended a young bard who dreamt of freedom. He also saved the Gunhilder clan, who had left Decarabian's city to live in the frozen wasteland, and their resulting faith empowered him. Eventually, Barbatos and the nameless bard, alongside Decarabian's disillusioned lover Amos and an unnamed knight, raised an army against the god of storms. They eventually emerged victorious, taking down the god and freeing the people from his stormy cage. Unfortunately, both Amos and the bard were among the casualties, causing deep regret for Barbatos. After Decarabian's demise, Barbatos claimed a divine seat in Celestia, becoming the first and only Anemo Archon among the Boreas, despite holding tremendous power, was aware that he was ill-fit for the role of a loving Archon who could nurture humanity. as he found human society to be a disappointment and only accepted abandoned infants and outcasts as his kin. Believing himself unfit for the position of a Nemo Archon, Boreas chose to disappear. In his final days, he realized that his icy blizzards could only destroy life and decided to let his power flow into the land of Mondstadt instead, putting an end to the icy storm. Boreas would eventually return as a spirit, watching over the area now known as Wolvendom and working with Barbatos as one of his four winds. Barbatos' first use of his powers was to take the form of the young bard as a way to honor him. After that, he used his wind powers to shape the land to make it prosperous for his people, teaching them the values of freedom. He then left the people to themselves, refusing to rule them directly and risk becoming a tyrant himself. Instead, he journeyed throughout Teyvat, often paying visits to the Geo-Archon, Morix of the neighboring nation of Liyue. This is for today. If I got 100 like, I will second part of about Liyue.